Warning. This episode contains foul language and discussions about death and religion.
Listening to Keep It Weird, we're the podcast for all things strange and unusual, for all things that make you say, what, who, where? And today, we're here to make you go, whoa.
Yep.
This week is part 2 of our discussion on coincidences and getting to the bottom of how they work, if they are real, and what you need to believe in order to experience them. Today we'll be covering all different faiths, the idea of fate and free will, synchronicities, interpreting messages from the universe, skepticism, and oh, so much more. So put on your thinking caps and come in with an open mind because we're about to experience some high strangeness.
Ooh.
My name is Ashley, and this is my co-host Lauren.
Hello, weirdos.
And we have peed. We're ready for part 2.
We had a nice bathroom trip.
Hey,
we are so prepared. Empty bladders, full hearts, can't lose.
This is going to be a long episode, so we'll get right into it. I actually
Yes.
have a quick story. Did I tell you about how I was abducted by aliens last week?
Hello? No? Well,
Okay,
go ahead.
Joe gets very upset with me when I start with that because the actual story of what happened is already so interesting, but that is what I experienced. The actual story is something entirely different. So
I'm already not well, but here we go.
Thursday night, at 2 a.m., I am awoken. I'm asleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm awoken to there's sound, and it's just all around me. It's so loud. It's just sound. And our room is lighting up, flashes of light in our room. And I'm literally like, it's time. They've come for me. I don't know how they found me in North Hollywood, but they're here. Take me, be gentle.
Sure, just bring me in.
Yeah, Joe comes in the room. He's awake. He stayed up. He was awake. He was like playing video games or something. Joe comes in the bedroom and goes, hey, just so you know, don't worry, the doors are locked. And I was like, I need more information.
Yeah, what?
Like, is there a war outside? What do you mean? Like, start over. What's happening?
What?
So apparently what had happened was, so Joe was out there and he heard a commotion outside. He heard like something slam and he thought maybe it was raccoons. We have raccoons that sometimes get into our dumpsters downstairs. And he kind of goes to the door to listen and he hears people talking. So he goes outside on the balcony and he hears like people talking about how there was a guy. And Joe was like, hey, what's going on? And our downstairs neighbor was like, there was a dude hiding in our trash cans. And when I came out and like was like, hey, he like jumped on our trash cans and jumped the fence. Well, within about like 2 minutes, about 15 cop cars show up outside and they have blocked off all the streets. They've blocked off our whole neighborhood. And Joe was like, what is happening? He gets on Citizen app and about 20 minutes before this, there was a notification that a man had shot a gun at an apartment building, like about half a mile from our place.
Oh my God.
No one heard the gunshots, but someone reported that a man had shot like twice at this apartment building. So Joe was like, holy shit. So does this guy have a gun? So the noise and the lights I was hearing was a LAPD helicopter. And like, if you live in LA, you are no stranger to them. They circle your neighborhoods all the time.
Right, of course.
For whatever reason. But this wasn't circling our neighborhood. It was just circling our apartment.
Whoa.
So it was literally like 100 feet above the tree line, doing these
Right.
tight circles around our apartment, shining its like spotlight
Yeah, that
on
would
our
feel
apartment.
so different than when, it's in the distance and going around your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's so intense.
So I truly thought I was being abducted. Turns out it was a fugitive, an armed fugitive.
Oh
But
my God.
yeah, so Joe was actually on our balcony, like holding this huge ceramic like candle holder thing, and he was like literally waiting. He was like, if he runs by, I'm throwing it.
Ooh,
And,
love that though.
Yeah, another one of our neighbors was downstairs, and he was like, he's over here, and they ended up they caught him. They caught him about half an hour to an
Thank
hour later.
goodness.
So,
I
but
mean, terrifying in so many ways. I'm glad you
So
guys are
scary.
safe, but also I would have thought that the aliens were coming to take me home as well with those loud noises and lights.
honestly, I went right back to sleep. Like when he told me, I was like, ugh, okay.
Ugh.
I do.
Oh, it's just a murderer?
Oh,
Fine.
it's just a murderer. Fine. I do sort of wish that the news or the LAPD helicopter was actually like a news helicopter, because it would have gotten one of the funniest images of me possibly
of
ever.
all time.
Because I didn't have my glasses on, and I kind of went to the window, and my hair was like in a
Squinted.
bun that was like falling out of my head, and I was like squinting, like looking, and I was like, and it pointed its spotlight right at me, and I was like, if that had been on the news, that would have been so funny.
Oh, I have such a vision of you just squinting
went
into
viral.
the sky in your nighttime bun, like, hello?
I was
Is
in like
it-
a
is it the
2XL
extraterrestrials?
2XL Hellboy shirt, and I was like,
Yes.
what? Yeah.
Hello? That's
so-
magical. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I'm
That's
happy you're
my
safe.
story.
I loved it so
Um,
much.
Today we're talking about coincidences, and what a
Yay.
coincidence. And Lauren is going to start us off.
Yeah. And like you said, I think we just have to kind of jump right in. So
Yeah.
you guys heard some amazing stories last week. And this week we're going to kind of talk about a little more behind the scenes, getting into some of the science and what is actually going on and the different beliefs that people have, the different theories. And maybe by the end of this, you'll kind of say, maybe this is what I believe. But we shall see. So, coincidences, guys. What do we all say? The most common phrase that is uttered when something miraculous happens. What are the odds?
What are the odds?
What are the odds? That is the catchphrase of coincidences, because a coincidence is not just something that was unlikely to happen, but it is something that we're taking notice of, and we feel like we're in this special location, in this special time, and it just gives off this magical feeling. So the label of coincidence is packed with a variety of experiences, and yet something more than just rarity makes us want to put all of these experiences together, because they have a similar kind of feeling that makes us all step back and wonder if everything in our life is just perfectly meant to be, and that random events will always lead us there. And the questions that still exist are where this feeling comes from, why we notice certain ways the events in our lives collide, and why we ignore other events in our lives. So there's all kinds of things going on.
I think it also is a big reason why, like, for example, like my grandparents, who are both passed now, but their neighbor Roger actually passed away this year of COVID, and he was old. You know, he was an old man. He lived a full life, but he was in World War II and Korea, and it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, can you imagine like surviving two horrific wars, surviving cancer, and then, you know, dying from a completely preventable disease.
Right.
You know what I mean? You hear about
Yes.
people like surviving, getting through cancer, like finally
Sure.
getting through cancer and then dying in a car accident.
Exactly.
And
And
it's
like, how is
yeah,
this
and
the
I
end?
think it's sort of the opposite of what a normal coincidence feels like, where it's like, oh wow,
Right.
and then the opposite is like, why?
Why?
Why make
did
them
this
suffer
happen?
like that, and then just they die
Right.
so instantaneously?
For sure. Yeah. There's so many questions about all of these things that happen. We don't understand how the universe operates. I truly will never understand. But
Which is a good argument for chaos.
yes, it is. So some people might say that the reason we get so excited about coincidences is just because most people don't understand probability. So I'm just going to kind of dive right into things that are going on. And I'm going to talk about lots of different scientists, and I'm probably going to say very incorrect names, and just bear with me.
Just give her a chance, guys.
Give me a chance. In their 1989 paper, Methods for Studying Coincidences, two mathematicians named Percy Diaconis and Frederick Mosteller considered defining a coincidence as a rare event, but decided that that includes way too much open air around it. Like that just that's way too vague, and it won't allow for a careful study. So they instead settled on a coincidence being a surprising occurrence of events perceived as meaningful and somehow related, even though there is no obvious connection, which we have touched on a little bit already. Mm-hmm. And so from a purely statistical point of view, these events are random, not meaningful related, and they shouldn't be that surprising because they actually happen all the time. Extremely improbable events are commonplace. Statistics professors would say this all the time, that it's nothing new. But humans generally aren't great at reasoning objectively about probability as we're going about our daily lives. And that is very true. We're not thinking of that. We're not thinking of statistics. We're just seeing something that feels rare and strange, and we get excited.
We're very egocentric, too.
Oh, 100%.
So when it's happening to us, it's like
we're the main character.
This is important.
Yes, this is important. I'm the main character of this movie called Life. So yeah, we're not thinking of that. And yes, that actually leads me into the biggest thing, is that people can be pretty liberal with what they consider coincidences in the first place. Mm-hmm. If you meet someone who shares your birthday, that seems like a super fun coincidence. And you might even feel the same way if someone shares your mother's birthday, or if it's like the day before yours or the same week. We will freak out about anything because we're looking for something exciting, and we want it to be about us and, amp up our life a little bit. But you look at it, there are so many people on this planet, billions, as we know. And according to the law of truly large numbers, with a large enough sample, any outrageous thing is likely to happen, which those mathematicians I mentioned, Diaconis and Mosteller, went on to say in their studies, that this was total commonplace. Like, we have so many people on this planet, anything that you consider outrageous actually makes so much probable sense because that's just what happens with large masses of people. And for example, if enough people buy lottery tickets, there's going to be a Powerball winner. And to the person who wins, it feels surprising and miraculous because they are one out of, whatever. So many people who bought them. But the fact that someone won doesn't surprise anybody else because we're like, yep, that's how the lottery works. Somebody wins, goodbye, and we all forget about it.
The higher the number of people who purchased a ticket seems more unlikely that you would win, but it is actually more likely that someone would win.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily
increases the chances.
Yeah.
But the person who wins is like, oh, this is 1 in a million. I just won the lotto. Like, this is nuts. And that is how we all think about it. But yeah, we just hear the winner on the news and we're like, oh, yep, somebody won the lottery. That's what happened. So
good for you.
Yeah, good for you. Enjoy your money.
Enjoy your money. Your dirty money.
Your dirty, dirty money. And even within the limited sample of our own lives, there are all kinds of opportunities for coincidences to happen. If you consider all of the people you know, all the places you go, all the places other people go, your friends, your relatives, everyone, chances are good that you will run into someone you know somewhere at some point, but it'll seem like a coincidence when you do. When anything that surprises us happens and we're not thinking about that, we freak out. It makes us believe that it was special. And to demonstrate how common unlikely seeming events can be, mathematicians also like to trot out what is called the birthday problem. And I have heard this one a million times. I'm sure you have, I'm sure our listeners have, but there is this trivia question that gets posed. I feel like I've seen it online a couple times that say, how many people need to be in a room before there's a 50-50 chance that 2 of them will share the same birthday? And I don't know exactly how you get there. Obviously, there's some math involved that I don't understand.
Math is not our friend.
It sure isn't. But the answer is 23. That is the correct answer. It's been proven all the time. The answer is 23 people. And that's not that many people to be in a room
Right.
where like someone will have your same birthday. So again, if that were to happen where you're at a birthday party or some other gathering and someone has the same birthday, whatever, we'd be excited, of course. But then you hear that and you're like, oh, that's
No,
actually
it's
really
actually not that
likely.
special at all.
Yeah, that must happen
There's only
all the damn time.
365 days a year.
I know. Right.
So.
There's also not that many birthdays. So you hear that and you're like, okay, is anything even special? Is it all truly just math and life is dull and boring? But then there are two researchers who I'm going to basically from this point forward talk about a whole lot. I'm going to focus on them for the rest of the episode, who I love. They have a very healthy skepticism of coincidences, but they also hate the birthday theory because it doesn't necessarily cover every situation. And these two guys that I'm going to mention both still kind of find the magic in coincidence stories through their scientific research. And that just makes me so happy.
I think that the birthday problem is so lackluster to me is because there's only one connection. It's
Right.
like, what's your birthday? The end.
100%.
But so many coincidences have step by step. They have
there's
layers to the coincidence where like this had to happen and this had to happen and
To
this had
lead
to
to
happen
this,
and
to
this
lead to
had to
that.
happen to lead to the one coincidence that's like, holy shit. What are the odds? What's the
agreed.
coincidence? Yeah. Whereas like birthday, it's like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like it does excite people. So again, I get
sure,
why it's
yeah.
mentioned because
Actually,
as
not
humans,
me.
we
When
are like,
someone's like-
you have my birthday?
When someone's like, oh, that's my birthday, I'm like, cool. Well, don't come near me on March 22nd because that's my day.
Yeah. You're also like, well, we're not celebrating together.
Reese
Give me my
Witherspoon,
moment.
back off.
Get away from me.
Keegan Michael Key, get out of town.
But also love Keegan Michael
But also,
Key.
like,
If you
I
guys
love
could
you,
have a
so if you come
combined
over,
birthday
that's totally
party,
fine. Yeah.
that'd be really great. Okay, perfect.
Sorry, go on.
Continuing on. So I'm going to start with a quote from one of the researchers named Bernard Bateman, who said, "Oh, those guys and their birthdays really get me mad," which is something he was
Same.
quoted as saying. I know. So Bateman is a psychiatrist and professor at the University of Virginia and author of the book Connecting with Coincidence. And he says that when someone asks, "What are the odds?" they most likely are not actually asking, what are the odds that a coincidence of this nature would have happened to anyone in this room? But more like, what are the odds that this specific thing is happening to me right here, right now, in this moment, in this universe, blah, blah, blah. Which is true. We're not looking for the math problem.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say, with anything more complicated than a birthday match, it becomes impossible to calculate, which is exactly what we were just saying. It's like the birthday... I hear what you're saying, little math men, but that's not what we're talking about here. And then the other guy I'm going to talk about is named David Spiegelhalter, and one of his first quotes was saying that a coincidence itself is in the eye of the beholder. Spiegelhalter is a professor at the University of Cambridge, and the other guy that I just love so much. And the magical part of coincidence to him is not that it happens, because again, we are learning that probability is a thing, but that we as humans pick up on it and notice it, and we are the reason coincidences are cool.
Yeah.
So, to bring it back to our part one of coincidences, I told a story by a journalist named Julie Beck. She was the author of that Cedar Point story that I mentioned last week. Please go back and listen. It's super fun. And she told professor and researcher Spiegelhalter the story over the phone because he actually collects coincidence stories on this website. He allows people to submit their stories. He currently has about 5,000 stories.
Ooh.
And there is a ton of studies still to be done on them. They have to kind of do some like data mining on it and have like the text pulled out and do a lot more analytics on it. But what they have done is they allow people when they submit to put in a category. So there is at least the analysis of how many categories there can be for coincidence. So Julie was able to tell her Cedar Point story, and so were many others on this website, and kind of put them into categories. And Spiegelhalter said of Julie's story, the Cedar Point story, that it fits into finding a link with someone you meet. But he went on to say that it's a very different sort of connection than what usually fits into that category. Because it's not like other people who said, oh, I met someone who lived in the same house as me. It's this person dropped money at this huge theme park with thousands of people that you happened to find, and that you then were next to a year later within earshot while he happened to be retelling the story of how he lost the money that you then found. He sort of went on the way you and I were last week when we were commenting on the story of like, Spiegelhalter just could not get over how many layers there were to it, and that the coincidence existed no matter what. Like, these two people were in the same location, basically a year apart, but they happened to meet each other and hear each other having this conversation, and, you know, were actually able to meet and confirm that the story was real, and she was listening at just the right moment, and he was just so blown away by it that he was like, okay, here's your category, but also you're super special.
Yeah.
And he firmly believes that these situations only happen to certain kinds of people, which, even though Bateman, the other researcher, does sort of a different approach, he also agrees with this theory. He very firmly believes that he has successfully found certain personality traits to be linked to experiencing coincidences. People who describe themselves as religious or spiritual, which is not surprising. Mm-hmm. People who are self-referential or likely to relate information from the external back to themselves. And people who are high in meaning-seeking events in life. They all seem to be coincidence prone, which makes total sense. These are the people who they're looking out for these things, and they're trying very hard to connect things to themselves. Mm-hmm. And he also believes that people are likely to see coincidences when they're sad, angry, or anxious, because it just opens them up a little bit more to things, and they're looking for solace. So honestly, they're trying to find peace in any way they can, and that opens them up as well, which makes sense. So for Bateman, probability is just not enough when it comes to studying coincidence, because statistics can describe what happens, but they can't explain it any further than chance. And so he goes on to say, I know there's something more going on than the way that we pay attention to things. Random is not enough of an explanation, and he's just looking for more. So he himself says his life is littered with coincidences because he's observant and he's looking out for them. He has that personality. And then Spiegelhalter believes in them wholeheartedly and loves to study them, but he says he actually never has experienced a big coincidence in his life. I know, which I kind of loved, because he just says, he's like, I'm not observant. When I'm out in the world, I'm just like looking down. I'm trying to get through my day. I'm just walking around, or I'm riding the train. And he says he never opens up conversations with strangers. He's not looking to make new friends. And he just believes he's a person that he keeps to himself, and he's not seeking to discover anything further than his normal daily routine. So Bateman, like Spiegelhalter, is interested in sorting and labeling different kinds of coincidences, but in his own way. He developed his own categories that are a bit more expansive and include not only things that happen in the world, but people's thoughts and feelings as well, which I think is like the key to it all.
Yeah.
So he divides coincidences into 3 broad categories. They're called environment, mind, and then mind. So environment are the most obvious and easiest to understand. These are the most common coincidences you'll hear about. So these are objectively observable. They are something or a series of things that happen in the physical world. For example, you're at a bar in Morocco and your long-lost love from years ago who lives in Paris happens to show up. Or in Julie Beck's case, the journalist, she found some money and a year later she met the person who lost it. That's environment. Mind environment are premonition-esque. So you're thinking of a friend and then they call you, which we mentioned in part 1.
Yeah.
Or you're thinking of a song and that song comes on. But these things sadly aren't really measurable unless you like write it down with the timestamp, or like text someone like, I can't get this song out of my head, and then it comes on while you're both in the car together. Then maybe that would be like a cool thing, but they're very cool for the person that it happens to. Obviously, it's like exciting when you're singing it in your head and then you turn on the radio and it's immediately on, but there's just no proof. Anybody can really say anything. And again, probability is just high that those things would happen, especially if it's a popular song that's playing or if it's a friend that you talk to often. It would happen. It's Like, those people are going to message you when you're thinking of them. That's just something that happens in our life. But another sort of mind-environment interaction is learning a new word and then suddenly seeing it everywhere, which I liked reading about this because this happens to me all the time. Or like hearing a song for the first time and saying like, oh, I didn't even know this song existed. And then it's on for like weeks everywhere I go, in every store, in every restaurant. But this is actually an effect that a Stanford linguistics professor named Arnold Zwicky calls the frequency illusion. And it's actually not a premonition as we want to believe, but it's just that once you've noticed something, your brain is primed to notice it again the next time you encounter it. A word or a concept goes the same way. You've just learned it. It's stuck in your mind. You may have even heard it 100 times before, but you hadn't focused on it or heard the actual definition. But now your mind is paying attention to it, and it's more likely to pop out at you. It's very scientific. It's very normal. It's not as magical as we all think.
Would the number 13 be a frequency illusion?
No. See, I think that's different because he is more saying like you hear something for the first time and actually focus on it, or you learn a definition of something and actually like absorb it.
Well, because I was thinking, like the number 13 popping out at you. And the thing is the number 13 is around you, just like all numbers. They're around you all the time.
Right.
But if you're looking for a specific one, if you're more aware of the number 13 than other numbers, then you are going to see that number more often simply because you are looking for it.
Which I agree. I guess in some ways, like, yes, that would fit in. But like in some ways, I do think... I don't know. I do think that numbers could be kind of following people because, I don't know, as much as you could tell yourself that, yes, maybe I'm just looking for the number 13, like, we're so familiar with all numbers that wouldn't we think every number sticks out to us? Or maybe not. Maybe your brain does tell you something of 13, 13, 13, like, look for it. I don't know. I feel like it only, like, half fits in.
Yeah.
To me, there is still something kind of mystical about seeing a number, but I don't know. It does fit in a way, but take that for what you will. And then the final category is the mind. And this one is probably the most mystical, magical of all. So one example of this is a term that Bateman coined called simulpathity, which describes the feeling or pain of emotion that someone else is feeling at a distance. And we actually touched on this in the twins episode. That there could be something genetic going on. Again, this is the category that has never really been explained. You can kind of rationalize a lot of coincidences away. This is one that people are sort of baffled by because nobody really understands why twins go through feeling the pain of each other when they're miles and miles away. But sometimes even non-twins feel this. And the reason Bateman coined this term and is so passionate about it is because he has a personal story. So he shares, in San Francisco in 1973, February 26th, he says, I stood at a sink uncontrollably choking. There was nothing in my throat, but I was choking like crazy, gasping for air. It was around 11 o'clock in San Francisco, and the next day my brother called me and told me that my father had died at 2 a.m. in Wilmington, Delaware, which 2 a.m. in Wilmington, Delaware is 11 o'clock in San Francisco, and he had died by choking on blood in his throat.
Oh my God.
So he says that was a dramatic experience that changed me for my entire life, and it made me want to go on the hunt to study coincidences in general, but also to find more people like me. And to his luck, he found that it actually happens pretty often to many people out there in the world, twins, as we said, but also to either just relatives or really close friends. So it's a phenomenon that really cannot be explained, but definitely happens. And that's the one that I just like, I have immediate chills when I hear a story like that.
Yeah.
Like how? I don't understand how that happened. He had nothing in his throat. He was just standing at the sink choking for what seemed like no reason.
Yeah, I hear a lot of stories about people that are like, I woke up in the middle of the night in a panic and I couldn't calm myself down. It came out of nowhere. And then they find out the next day that like their best friend or their sister was like in a car accident around that time.
Right.
Or I, all of a sudden had like horrific chest pains. They came out of nowhere. It wasn't indigestion. I hadn't eaten anything. I didn't know what it was. And you find out that someone close to you had a heart attack at the same time. And it's just like, we don't understand anything.
Right. You just think like, how, like this can't be real. We can't just be.
Because you're not. It doesn't have anything to do with you thinking about it and then having the pain, because that's something that happens. You can really like fuck yourself up by believing, and so that's why WebMD
you're convincing
is
yourself
you
experience something.
But if you don't know it's happening, you have no idea.
Yeah, and it just comes out of the blue, and then you receive news like that, and you're like, okay, well, that was exactly what was happening to me, but why? So that's crazy. And that fits into that mind category that truly nobody can explain at the moment.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what Bateman was studying. And then, he goes on to say that leaving a coincidence as nothing more than a curiosity may be the more evidence-based approach. And it is what a lot of people try to put themselves in the mindset of, because they just think like, I can't wrap my head around this, so I'm just going to say whatever. Probability tells me that, of course, this would happen. But it's also not fair to say that the people who make meaning from coincidences are irrational, because the process by which we notice coincidences is part of our cognitive architecture. It's the way that our minds work. It's the way that we're designed to make sense of the world. We find surprise and we call things a miracle because that's how we're processing and perceiving the information, and we're not immediately, sitting down doing a math problem. So most people out there want to find connection in these random events because it's how we process. It's how we use our emotions. So this kind of brings me into fate and free will, which is a huge thing in the world. And there is a large group of people, especially spiritual people, that like to find meaning in random events because they believe in fate. And many religious people as well, because there's absolutely a difference. There's then the people, in the institutions and really, really embedded in religion, not all, but many, who believe that God has their entire life mapped out for them. Mm-hmm. And I was even telling Ashley a little bit about this last week, that I actually saw so much of that when I was attending church regularly and going to Bible studies, that some of the leaders of the groups would talk about how they felt they had no control of their life because it was predetermined by God. And even when a decision was seemingly so much their own and they were grueling over it, it was like they would come to the Bible study talking about how much stress they were under, deciding if they should leave their job. And it felt very much like we were talking them through it. They were talking themselves through it. But then they would just say, oh no, what I told you guys last week, that was God. Like God was pulling the strings. Yeah, God was pulling the strings like a puppet master.
Freaking sense, because the Bible says.
I know. I don't understand it, Ashley, and I could go on and on. Like, again, and I know that we have religious people who follow us, and like, please email us and talk to us. Like, I want to get in an honest conversation about this with you. Like, truly, I do. Like, I would love to have more of an understanding, because in those days when I was attending church and going to these Bible studies, I was always sitting there kind of rolling my eyes because I didn't understand it. Like, how could God be this puppet master? How could it be both? Yeah, how could it be both? How did you seem so much in this debate of choosing the path and grueling with yourself and feeling very much like you were about to make that decision, but then you're telling me God made the decision for you because he knows best? And yeah, they would say like, oh, God made sure I made that specific choice. Like, it sounded like I was debating, but God always knew what I was going to decide. Yeah. And I personally really struggled with that. I'm just saying, like, that is just my opinion. I have not.
Where does the free will come in then? So is it only people that choose to sin or like break the 10 commandments, that like that's the only time that free will comes in? It just doesn't.
Is it only the sinners?
It's like, only serial killers are the ones that are like, well, they listen to the devil, and it's like, well, how do you know which one's the God and which one's the devil? Like, how do you know the devil's not making this decision for you? It just doesn't. You know what? Don't buy it.
I know. I just, yeah. And I appreciate that you're on my same page because I've always struggled with that. And that may even be part of the reason that I ended up leaving the church, to be honest, because I just never felt like I was getting an honest answer when I would try to dig into it more. And, I mean, it was like the domino effect and a lot of things happened after that. But it was just hard for me to accept that even if we want something to go a certain way and we are fighting over something, that it's possible that God could, or a higher power could be orchestrating our life to go in a completely different direction that doesn't even relate to our life in any way. That also baffles me because I believe like we have that free will because of who we are as people. Like there has to be a way to get ourselves on the right path. Yeah. And I don't know. I struggle with that whole predetermination thing. And I feel like we somehow have to have the power to get ourselves through life through our own decision making, even if there is an idea or a loose template of what our life should look like somewhere out there in the world. I think we can still create those specifics and connect the dots in our own way. Or at least that is how I've always looked at it. But I have also heard people, again, to defend both sides, because, again, that is not all people in the church. But because I have also heard people who went to my old church sometimes say that God has plans and hopes for them, but that they still have to be listening to the call or interpreting the call in their own way to get the results that they want. So that always comforted me a little when I would have those conversations of people being like, I know that God has this outlook for me and has hopes for me to go down this path, but I ultimately have to choose that. And I was like, oh, okay, yep, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a parent who's like, you know, I really want you to be a doctor, so I'm going to make sure that you go to this good school, and I'm going to, make sure that I impress upon you that I would like you to become a doctor, but it's, the kid might be like, I'm going to art school. And it's like, son of a bitch.
God damn it.
Also,
wasn't what I thought.
Go to art school.
Yeah, God could be that parent that Athley is your
Athlete?
Athley that Ashley just referenced. God could be the parent in that situation, and you have to be listening to the call or going on your own path to get the results that you want. And this makes me think that sometimes religious or spiritual people are agreeing with me and are on the same page, that maybe there is some sort of higher power. If you're not spiritual, if you're not religious, I don't know necessarily what everyone believes in, and that's, we all have our own thoughts, and that's totally fine and fair for everyone, but maybe there is some superior power at work. Whatever that may be, could literally be like electricity. I don't know. But maybe things are connected in some way, and we just have to be listening, and we have to be open-minded, and we have to be sort of on the search for it in order for things to actually happen. Like there may be some sort of fate that's out there for you, and these opportunities are coming, but are you even listening to them, and are you even seeing them? So what it comes down to for me is that I think fate and free will can both exist together.
Right.
I don't have all the answers, but it seems to be that fate can present itself through opportunities that come at you throughout your life, and you just have to be open to receive them, and you can choose that road that you want to go down in order to get to that fate. And I don't think that someone can expect things to fall in their lap and for fate to find them, or this big destiny to reveal itself in a big, unexpected way, like fireworks. Like, you do have to put in a little bit of the work. And if you're someone, this was something I also read in some articles, because I was like, am I crazy? Am I just bitching about nothing? But I read a lot of articles, both from like pastors, philosophers, scientists, and everyone kind of goes on saying, maybe there is some bit of predetermination in our life, but you can't be a person who just sits at home and complains all the time and expect it to just like knock on your door. And I know a lot of people currently in my life who say they're in a dead-end job, and all they do is complain and say they know that something's going to come their way. Something's going to come find them and present them the opportunity when the time is right. So they just have to keep paying their dues. But it doesn't seem like they're applying for jobs. They're not networking. They're not looking for anything. And obviously, if there is some sort of fate, you don't have to do like too much crazy work, but you do have to like exist and put the work out there. Like, send an email, walk down the street, go on LinkedIn, do something. Don't just sit in a cubicle wasting away. You have to put yourself out there in some way, put in a little bit of work, and then maybe that right place, right time moment that you've been thinking of will happen, but you have to actually put yourself there. And hopefully one of your choices will put you in front of someone with just the right opportunity for you, and it will match up, and that can be your big, crazy coincidence story. But you can't just sit there and hope that that
happens.
Finds you. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with fate and free will. And I think it's really hard to say what is real because, again, I went down the rabbit hole, and everyone, no matter which side you talk to, whether it's science, philosophy, religion, everyone sort of came to the same end of like, you have to decide that for yourself. But for the most part, it seems to be that you do have to put yourself into the world to think that you're going to receive some sort of fate and some sort of destiny for your life. Like, you can't really just sit back. How do you feel?
Well, if you look at like the multiple timeline theory too, like fate can still exist alongside free will, especially if there are multiple timelines and each one is predestined. It's like if you make this decision, ultimately it could end here. If you make this decision, ultimate your life could end here. Or go this way or whatever. Like in one timeline, I could be like a famous, I was almost going to say doctor, but that's hilarious because I've never passed a math class in my life. I'm not going to be a famous doctor on any timeline. But like on one timeline, maybe I still have a mohawk and I'm a painter. You know what I mean? But like,
hell yeah.
It all could have been fate in that timeline, but I made a different decision. And now I'm on a different path that's leading me to an endpoint that is predestined. But if I make a different decision, there's a new endpoint that's predestined.
Right. I'm 100% with you. I think that could absolutely be happening. And we talk about multiple timelines on the show a lot. And I feel like coincidences actually kind of like brings that back. And that like maybe those are things intersecting and getting us like onto that path of, oh, yep, this is where you were supposed to be, like right place, right time. Now you're on your way to your predestined ending that we always knew was there for you, which is interesting. But I kind of wanted to leave you all with this as I come down for my fate free will rant that I feel like I just went on for way too long. While I was doing research, I came across this like life wellness coaches page who was talking about fate and free will. And at first I was sort of like, oh, I feel like she's spewing out so much jargon. I don't know if I like her. But I kind of liked her little 3-step plan that she put at the end of her speech. And I was like, I kind of like this, so I'll tell it to you guys too. She says, here are 3 tips for bending destiny in your favor. And her name is Donna Lynn.
Love it.
She's the author of Life Lessons, Everything You Ever Wished You Had Learned in Kindergarten. Here are her 3 tips. 1, pay attention to your life. It's trying to tell you something. Fate is constantly bringing you opportunities, but you just have to be conscious enough to see them. Slow down and pay attention so you don't miss fate's critical stirrings. 2, you have to act or nothing will change. Snap, snap, that's what I was just saying. Fate brings you possibilities, but it can't make you take them. Don't sit on the bench and watch opportunities go by. If you don't act, you don't get. And 3, if it feels like you're hitting your head on a wall, stop it. You may be using your free will to force an outcome that is not right for you. And if you are trying to force change, but it isn't happening, then it isn't meant to happen. So walk away, which I really, really like step 3, because that actually touches on kind of the side that we didn't talk about at all. Like sitting and waiting for fate is one thing, but what if you're using your free will to force something that you think is right, but it keeps feeling uncomfy and roadblocks keep popping up and all these negative things are happening to you? That could also be a sign for you from the universe of like, oh, no. Maybe sit back on this and rethink some things. So,
but it could also be if you're uncomfy and it's hard and it's difficult, it might just be that like every single time you make a big change, whether it's in yourself or in something that you're doing, you're literally bending the universe around you. You're changing everything. If everything that's ever happened has already happened and is happening right now, you're literally changing the world. It's not going to be like felt through making this decision. So it might just be hard to do that.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like, it might literally be like, you're bending physics.
Yeah.
By doing
and that's
this hard
why
thing.
things start to feel uncomfortable, because you're changing literally everything around you because you made this choice.
The Jersey Devil, Wendigo, the Gates of Hell,
Bloody Mary, the Vanishing Hitchhiker, the Licking Hand,
the Hook-Handed Killer, the Lady in White.
the Killer in the Back Seat, Pop Rocks and Diet Soda.
We've all heard the stories around the campfire or water cooler. We've all shared the legends with hushed whispers or nervous laughter. But do we really know the truth?
Do we really know what goes bump in the night? Do we want to?
I'm Micah,
And I'm Amanda.
and together, every Friday night, we bring you a brand new, no-holds-barred glimpse at an urban legend from right in your backyard. The Great American Urban Legend Podcast is raw and it is real. It is well-written, expertly produced, and as informative as it is irreverent.
If you're looking for a podcast that is authentic, frightful, and funny, you found it.
Whether you want to hear about ancient pagan religions, the Norse pantheon, or Greek mythology, we've got you covered.
If you are at all curious or interested in the macabre, superstitions, cryptid, or crime, you've come to the right place.
Join us every Friday night at 9 p.m. for another harrowing and hilarious dive into the infinite abyss at the Great American Urban Legend.
So today I'm talking about synchronicity. You've probably heard this word a lot, but may not have any idea what it means or where it originated or if you've ever experienced it. And I'm going to start from the beginning. The term synchronicity was coined by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. I'm sure you've heard that name before. He founded analytical psychology. He worked with Sigmund Freud for many years, kind of as counterparts, until they kind of had to break away from each other because they just had two very different ideas about psychology.
Right.
Carl Jung created some of the best-known psychological concepts we have, including extroversion and introversion. So if you've ever heard, like, I'm an introvert, you can thank him. And even collective unconsciousness, which is a theory I am very fond of and may touch on today as well.
Yes.
He's a very respected psychoanalyst and held strong beliefs in a wide variety of paranormal phenomenon, including psychic powers, predictive dreams, UFOs, and telekinesis. So he's kind of my dude.
He's truly the best.
Truly the best.
Idol.
So synchronicity is essentially what you were talking about. It's circumstances that appear meaningfully related yet lack a causal connection. And it's what gives meaning to the coincidences. And it began as a purely psychological study of the mind and how, like you were saying, our psyche is able to make connections. And in some cases, searches for new information that confirms preconceptions, but also, like you were saying, that we didn't touch on that much, but avoids information that contradicts their prior beliefs.
Yes.
But the more research he did and the more spiritual he became, it morphed into a much more universal concept. And he believed that life was not a series of random events, but rather an expression of a deeper order. Jung believed that in a person's life, synchronicity served a role similar to that of dreams, with the purpose of shifting a person's egocentric conscious thinking to greater wholeness, basically bringing you closer to being one with the universe.
Okay.
That you had to take it out of the ego. It's not about you.
Right.
It is about everything.
And then being able to just connect to everything around you.
And that synchronicities are a way to do that. Science and mathematicians, not a fan of synchronicity.
Of course.
Young and like-minded individuals share the belief that numbers are the archetypes of order and major participants in synchronicity creation, and they're not the enemy. And there's a theory called dynamical systems, which is an area of mathematics used to describe the behavior of complex dynamical systems and basically shows that there is a behavior to math.
Wow.
And it is an offshoot because most of modern research is focused on the study of chaotic systems, which believes there is no behavior and everything is chaos and coincidences are not real. One thing we've mentioned on the show before that goes along with the math side of this is random number generators. And random number generation is exactly what it says. They generate a sequence of numbers that cannot be reasonably predicted better than by random chance. They are truly random. But there's research being done by several people. One of them is the Global Consciousness Project that has suggested that the behavior of random number generators can be affected by important world events or even sometimes psychic powers. For example, it was found that random number generators behaved non-randomly shortly before, during, and for some days after the September 11th terrorist attacks. And this is random number generators all over. Started computing numbers that seemed to be non-random.
And wait, like, in what way were they not
so
random?
If you
like
go,
they were connected to the attacks?
Yeah. Well, no, not connected to the attacks, but basically like it happens at other times too. It happens during like award ceremonies, jury verdicts in major criminal cases, natural disasters, protests. Basically, they believe that the shared consciousness of large groups of people who are focusing their minds on the same event somehow affects the random activity in random number generators. And you can I know, you can go to their site. I'll find the link to it, but it's basically the Global Consciousness Project. And you can play around with a random number generator to see how it works, like what it does. And like I said, there are random number generators all over the world. And for whatever reason, during very big events like this, where enough people, millions of people are putting their minds to one thing, they behave differently.
Interesting. That is so cool.
And these studies are important because it does suggest a behavior involving numbers, math, chance, etc.
Right.
So, basically, you know, I know you were saying this a little bit earlier, synchronicity as well as like coincidences, meaningful coincidences are regarded as complete pseudoscience. And like you said, it's not even necessarily because it isn't possible, but that there would be no way to prove it.
Right. Like how do you even begin to prove it? Yeah.
What guide could we possibly use to determine the correctness of an interpretation? Yeah. And there was one quote I was trying to scroll and find earlier when you were talking about this, but I couldn't get to it fast enough. And because Carl Jung completely acknowledged this, quote unquote problem of not being able to prove it. But it doesn't stop a large portion of people from believing it exists. And Jung actually said, an initial mood of faith and optimism makes for good results. Skepticism and resistance have the opposite effect. That is, they create unfavorable disposition. So like you were saying, it has to be the certain type of person who is open to it, looking for it. There's something known as confirmation bias. And you did kind of touch on this as well. It's essentially like the tendency to interpret new evidence as a confirmation of your existing beliefs and theories. And like I was saying earlier, if you're looking out for the number 13, you're way more likely to find that number all around you all the time.
Right.
When in reality, all numbers are all around you all the time, but you're convinced of the significance.
You're looking for 13.
Of 13. Therefore, it becomes significant and therefore it becomes abundant, but it's not really abundant. You just are noticing it.
Sure.
Which to some people is like, well, that's confirmation bias. But the universe may be like, no, it's not. I'm showing you this. We don't know.
Right.
And another thing that you said earlier, like synchronicity in its simplest definition is meaningful coincidences. So for a lot of believers, it's not just like looking for coincidences. That's not what makes it meaningful, like looking for them and finding them. The meaningful part is in experiencing a coincidence that is personally meaningful in such a way that it makes you stop and pay attention.
Yes. Stops you in your tracks.
Yeah. Not that
I am
you're
listening, I'm looking.
Constantly searching for it, but that something happens that makes you literally stop and go, huh?
Yes. That's the amazing part.
So if you're noticing synchronicities, what does that mean? Carl Jung wasn't really specific when he was talking about an individual's experiences, but in conjunction with his other beliefs, he does seem to believe that synchronicity signifies some sort of psychic, if that's what you want to call it, event or connection to the collective unconsciousness is occurring. And that's the collective unconsciousness of the universe, not just between humans, like human to human, but all things. And
Okay.
you've heard the word synchronicities a lot in the documentary Hellier, for those of you who've watched it.
Mm-hmm.
I highly
That was my first
recommend
thought.
it. I believe it's on YouTube and Amazon Prime, but I'm not sure.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's on Amazon now. You may have to pay a little rental fee on Amazon, but truly it's worth it.
I'm pretty sure it's
so
free
good.
on YouTube. I don't know. Look it up.
is.
It's fantastic. And as they were doing their investigation of the gremlins, goblins, the whatever, aliens, I don't know, in Hellier, Kentucky. I can't remember what they called them. Were they goblins?
I was just thinking
Gremlins?
that when you said it. When you
Trolls?
first said gremlins, I nodded. And then when you said goblins, I was like, oh, maybe that makes more sense than a gremlin. Maybe they said goblin because I feel like gremlin is too associated with the movie. They wouldn't have said that.
Okay.
So
Whenever
maybe
they
goblin?
were researching, doing their investigation of the creatures in Hellier, Kentucky, they were experiencing many synchronicities, and they believed that those meaningful coincidences were indicating to them that they were on the right path, that the choices they were making were leading them in the right direction. And we see that in everyday life. Like on our good days, on our best days, everything seems to be going right.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're consistently, like you get to be on a roll, and you're getting good news after good news. Good things are happening. Your coffee tastes better. Like you feel better about things. On bad days, everything seems to be going wrong, and it absolutely is probably our perception. Like I'm sure that my fucking pocket gets stuck on the door handle on good days as well, and I barely notice it. And on bad days, I'm like, really?
And it literally makes you want to murder somebody because you're like, oh, my jacket's
Today?
on the toilet
Yeah.
when I'm already bawling. Yeah, it's terrible.
It certainly seems like that sort of thing happens more on bad days than good days. But the probability, as you were saying before, probably it's the same amount. But who knows? Basically, what you can take away from synchronicities, no matter what you believe in, whether you are religious in some way, you practice Buddhism, you're a spiritual person, or even a complete atheist, is just to be present. And this helps immensely with anxiety. You know, people like me with severe anxiety disorders, the reason that I experience anxieties is because I'm living in the past or the future. So whether I'm suffering because I'm thinking of things that I should or shouldn't have done in the past, or suffering because I am scared of XYZ taking place in the future, if I were to just live in the now, live in the current moment, those fears would subside, because currently I'm talking to my best friend while thousands of lovely people are listening to my voice and things are wonderful. You know?
Yeah, right.
So if you're present in every moment and you are just being mindful, you will start to notice more and more things around you, because that's where your mind's going to be. Like when you were talking about the guy earlier, the researcher who he's like, I never experience coincidences. I guarantee he has anxiety.
Oh,
he's like, I keep to
100%.
myself. I don't talk to other people.
He's like
When you
a
have
huge
anxiety,
introvert with anxiety
Yeah.
and maybe even depression, where he's just sort of like, I am just going through the motions and I go to work and then I go home. And yes, I think that too.
Anxiety causes you to not be physically able to be present in the moment, or mentally or emotionally able to be present in the moment. And when you're not present in the moment, you're not going to notice shit.
Right.
You're not going to notice that it's 11:11. You're not going to notice, these little things that happen that are significant or insignificant, because we don't fucking know. But if you can be present, you will start to notice different patterns. You'll notice more and more things around you. If you start noticing like the same numbers over and over again, or you start seeing white butterflies, or you start noticing a particular symbol pop up in your life a lot, just pay attention to your thoughts at that moment. What were you doing? What were you thinking? What were you working on? And just make a note of it, like write it down even, and just see if there are any patterns.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Because I think what you said earlier was, what was the thing that he said that coincidences were?
Oh, a coincidence is in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. So I have written in my notes, and this is just in my own words, but I think it's the exact same thing. Coincidences and synchronicities are a state of mind.
Yes.
They are personal.
That's exactly what he was saying. Like, it is how you are viewing it. It is how it is meaningful to you. That is why coincidences are what they are and why they're cool.
And also why, like, science can't couldn't
Explain
possibly begin. Science and math couldn't possibly begin to explain them. They mean what you want them to mean.
Yes.
A lot of spiritual people refer to these things, these synchronicities, as winks from the universe. Like the universe is winking at you. So if you believe in, the law of attraction or manifestation, it's the universe that's winking at you. If you believe in God and angels, it's winks from them. If you believe in science, it's luck that's sort of favoring you.
Yes.
And but even if you just want to be scientific, if you just want to look at it that way, there is a phenomenon that is measurable, and it's called spontaneous synchronization.
Okay.
Objects with rhythms naturally synchronize. And this has been documented since 1665, when a Dutch physicist named Christian Huygens, he actually had the flu, so he was in bed. He was sick and he was in bed, and he had a pair of new pendulum clocks that were hung side by side on the wall, and he was in bed and he was sick. He just happened to be focusing on them, ticking back and forth, swinging back and forth, and he happened to notice that the pendulum swung exactly in unison, always lurching towards each other, then away from each other. And he started to theorize that maybe the air pressure caused by each of them was influencing the other and then synchronizing their swings. And then he performed a ton of experiments and did find that things like pendulums and metronomes, even if you started them out not at the same rate, would eventually
they can become in sync. Yeah. That's very cool.
But it's not just rhythms. In 1690, a naturalist named Engelbert Kampfer traveled to Thailand and noticed, he observed the local fireflies flashing simultaneously. He began his study in the biology of synchronization. So it also happens a lot in biology. And then radio engineers in the 1920s discovered that wiring together electrical generators with different frequencies forced them to vibrate with a common frequency, which then became the principle behind radio communication. It's why we have radio communication, because if you take two things with different frequencies and you try to make them work together, they will be forced to have a common frequency. They will both change their frequency and synchronize with each other.
Wow. Okay.
And
That's
then
interesting.
In 1967, a theoretical biologist, another biologist named Art Winfrey, studied the pulsating chirps of crickets and proposed a mathematical, here we go with math, so here's math again, model of synchronization. And his equation actually ended up being too difficult to solve until 1974, when a Japanese physicist named Yoshiki Kuramoto discovered how to simplify the math and literally discovered that things with rhythms, including metronomes and heartbeats coupled together, will spontaneously synchronize. You know, skin to skin with babies?
Yes.
If you put the baby next to your chest.
then your hearts start to synchronize.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So maybe with this, the thing is, this is all science and it's all measurable. And
right, this is stuff we know to be true.
Yeah, physics, biology, math. Maybe with all of this put together, people are going to stop rolling their eyes at spiritual people who say, you know, like, you have to match the vibrations that you want in life.
Right.
Being
that is
positive,
a real thing.
Exerting positive vibes and that leading to positive outcomes. Literally, the science is there that says that this is true, but we haven't quite figured out the connective tissue yet, but it's there.
It's so there. And that
vibrations,
is so cool.
Frequency, oscillations, rhythms. We are made out of these things. Like, we have all of these things. We have vibrations. We have a frequency that we put off. We have radio waves that we put off. We have rhythms in our heartbeat and our pulse and our literal metabolic systems.
Right.
We're made of all these things, and we vibe literally with certain people. We vibe with certain places. So just start paying more attention to it, because someday, probably not in our lifetime, but someday human beings are going to realize that all this woo-woo shit is real. Mm-hmm. And it's actually not as, like, crazy as we think it is.
It's not as, like, I feel like people think of it as like witchcraft, paranormal, like they just, you try to stretch it, but it actually has very scientific backing. Yeah, 100%.
It's just a naturally occurring thing, and we just don't know. We don't have the tools to measure it yet.
We don't, but I pray that we get there because it's just so fascinating and it's so cool. Just feels like we're all connected. It really does.
It really does.
I'm just getting emotional over here.
People to people, like...
To the universe completely. Like, everything feels connected.
Yeah. To, like... And that's one, like, theory when it comes to, like, UFOs and extraterrestrials is that they have figured this shit out. Mm-hmm. They know this already.
They're ahead of us.
And therefore, when massive amounts of pain are happening on a planet, like the last year, it affects them, too.
Yeah.
Because they know how the universe works.
We're messing them up, guys. They already know.
Any final thoughts on coincidences besides the fact that we love them?
That they are so freaking cool. Okay, so Carl Jung, I'm down in the portion of my notes that I labeled as not necessary notes, but use if you feel like it, because I went over the top. And I had a section, you reminded me earlier when you said, like, oh, I feel like he has really good quotes about these things. I found one that I liked that I tucked away when he was talking about he hated the fact that science was always so like, oh, we can't measure this. We can't do this and this. And we're giving you the probability and we're giving you all that we can. But you get to a point where we just can't measure it and you're not going to be able to grasp these unique and rare events. And he described coincidences as being this chaotic collection of curiosities, rather like those old natural history cabinets that one finds where there is a cheek by jowl with fossils and anatomical monsters in bottles, horns of a unicorn, and a dried mermaid all put together. And he said that is how we should look at coincidences, because none of them are ever going to look the same. There's never really going to be the science that we want to categorize them and tell us what they mean and how they should be, and this is this and this is that. I kind of like his magical view on it of like, it's going to look like a wizard's cabinet. That is, it's going to be this magical cabinet forever where no two stories look the same. We're all viewing them in our own way because, again, as we keep saying, they are meaningful to the individual. And coincidences are just a cabinet of curiosities, ladies and gentlemen, that we get to read and get goosebumps from and say, what in the hell, all together. And feels mystical and very fun.
Mm-hmm. But, like I said, there could be a time in the future, probably not in our lifetime, where these things are measurable, because we will have a tool, an actual literal hold in your hand tool that measures it. Because the thing is like we knew about electricity long before we knew how to measure electricity, because we didn't have the tool to be able to do it. We knew about electromagnetic frequencies long before we had a tool that was able to measure electromagnetic frequencies. And now I have 2 EMF readers, randomly thrown about our house.
Yeah, now they're just household items. So, yes.
Eventually, we may be able to have a tool that measures these events, and maybe random number generators are the beginnings of those tools. Maybe that is something
it seems
that's
like they are,
work on
because
this.
That is crazy. That definitely shows that our collective focus is doing something, and that it just shows that the collective consciousness is real.
If you could carry around a random number generator your entire day and just have a personal one on you that ran all day, and could look at it at the end of the day and find the points of the day where it became non-random, and measure it up to a time of day, and then go back and be like, what was happening at 2 p.m.
to make those connections. What was
be like,
that?
That was when this, strange thing happened. It really, we don't know. We'll figure it out. Or
in years to come.
The super volcano at the Yellowstone Park will explode and we'll all be wiped off the face of the earth.
And then it won't matter.
And it won't matter.
No, and I agree. And I hope for that science. Like, again, even if it's not in our lifetime, I hope for that for the future. I more read that quote just to say that I loved Carl's view of just like, okay, well, if you're going to tell me that science can never prove this, then I'm just going to tell you that I have a magical wizard's cabinet of all these people's stories. And I think this is a beautiful experience that we all get to have together, and it's connecting us in such a special way. So, again, as you said when you even first started, Carl's the man.
He really
and
is.
I like him.
I like his style.
Me too.
That's all the time we have for Keep It Weird. Thank you so much for listening to our show and supporting us in whatever way you support us, whether it's listening, following us on social media at Keep It Weirdcast, donating to our Patreon, rating our show on iTunes, telling your friends, or buying and repping our merch everywhere you go.
Yes, please.
If you want to join our Patreon and get 2 bonus episodes a month and a newsletter and discounts on merch and shout outs on the show, head over to patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast. If you want a t-shirt or hoodie, head over to etsy.com/shop/keepitweirdpodcast. And if you're a patron and you haven't gotten your coupon code, just shoot us a message and we'll give it to you. No problem. You can also like search our post on the Patreon and you should find it there. But if not, just like send us a message. Now, I'm not sure what our episode next week is going to be. We're working on scheduling a guest, hopefully. But I did want to say this. Next month, we are going to be sitting down with Chloe from Stripper Stories podcast. And we are going to talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things.
Yes.
Let's talk about sex. So, if you have any questions about sex, fetishes, strippers, or even sex work, please send them to us at keepitweirdpodcast@gmail.com so we can make sure to have a handful of questions from you guys for her for that episode. Today's sign off is
Carl Young has got it going on. Carl Young has got it going on.
I was gonna say
No, please come up with something better. That was just on my heart.
I was just gonna give everyone a challenge to just like spend a few hours of your week just kind of being more mindful and seeing if you can live more in the moment and notice more things around you. And the more you do that, I've started, I talk about mindfulness a lot on the show, but I was saying like pick moments that are easy for you to do, like brushing your teeth. Like instead of like sometimes I get in a bad habit of like brushing my teeth and also trying to be on TikTok, and I have an electric toothbrush. I can't even fucking hear what's happening on TikTok. I'm like trying to and it's like, why don't I just brush my teeth in this moment?
Right.
Just like live in this moment, brushing my teeth. Washing the
Why did I have
dishes
to get
is
my
another
phone
good
out
one.
and have entertainment?
Yeah, washing the dishes is a good moment to do it. Like just wash the dishes and don't sit there and like run through conversations in your head that you're planning on having or that you had in the past, or think about a show you're watching. Like just wash the dishes. Just pay attention and focus on washing the dishes and think about what you're doing. And if you start doing that in little moments of your day, showering, washing the dishes, walking to your car, stuff like that, it'll start to become habit, and then you can start incorporating it in more moments of your day, and then eventually you'll have more mindfulness, and things like this, like interesting, cool little coincidences and synchronicities like these may start popping out of you, like becoming a little bit more obvious to you.
You'll be able
if
to
it's
pick
something
up on
that
a
you're
little
interested in.
Yeah. You may start to notice a whole lot more around you.
Yep.
And
keep it weird.
Keep it weird. What is happening?
I'm listening to the pronunciation of Carl Jung.
Oh, I wish you could know what just went through my soul. I thought we were picking up someone else's conversation, and I was about to cry.
You ready? Here it comes.
Carl Jung
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, it
I
is
was saying
young.
it right. It is young.
So there's no je. It's just young.
No.
Okay.
Young.
Okay.
Thank God.
So I know, of course, you nailed it.